Hello everyone, so Michael with you here again, and I have your global feedback for yesterday's demo lesson. So the question was this here, multiple chart, and there's a government spending, so the proportions, and then there was the number of participants in the same events. So before I continue, I just wanted to say that it seems like there are a lot of new students doing the demo lessons, or at least doing this demo lesson. And really, it's just the demo lessons are for people who've completed the course. There are a few reasons for this, but the main reason is that the course is the most important part of what you will learn. So really, you should be completing the modules first. Another reason then is that, like, in these demo lessons, I'm presuming that you have already completed the course. So I'm kind of running through things assuming that you already know what the course tells you. So you won't get as much out of these demo lessons unless you do the course first. So not that I don't want you to participate, just that I want you to get the most you can out of the course. So if you're a new member, please just go and do the modules first. That's all. Strengths then, so structure and content were all spot on, and choosing the key features. So I thought this would be a bit more challenging for you guys, but it seemed like your key features in your overview and the way that you use that then to organize your details, paragraphs and everything, it was all like spot on. I mean, pretty much exactly the way I would have done it. Also including the most important information, the details, paragraphs. So for pretty much everyone who answered the question, you did a good job of all these things. So this, I just thought I'd like show you this. Now, if you're answering on a laptop, if you're using a laptop to watch the demo lesson, I would strongly advise you to just take a screenshot of the question, and then you can make these little annotations. So I've just drawn like up arrows and down arrows. It's just easier to kind of see what's happening. So a lot of you went with like which was the main segment, and down here a lot of you went with music was the highest in both years, had the most participants in both years, and that's fine. That's perfectly acceptable overview. What I thought you could have done better was kind of like group these. So some of you did, some of you didn't, but in the details paragraphs, it would have made sense to kind of put these two together because they increased, and put these two together because they decreased. I think it's kind of significant that visual arts was the only one that had less participants in 2005. So that there, not many, if not none of you, really called that out as being significant. And it doesn't even have to be in the overview, but you could just say something like, and visual arts was the only one that decreased over the time period, and put in your data. It might not be significant enough for the overview, but I think you could have drawn more attention to that particular thing, that went down. Another one then, that nobody really highlighted too much, is that it's the same four categories here and here. So the pie charts and the bar chart are representing visual arts, theatre, music and literature. And most of you just went and compared the two pie charts together, and then compared the categories within the bar chart. But to get a higher score, you'd want to make some kind of a reference to the fact that the information, like some kind of a focus, some kind of a comparison between the bar charts and the pie charts. So that could have been something along the lines of, so like what we have, music was had the biggest proportion here, had the biggest proportion here, and had most participants in both years. So that could have been something you mentioned that you could have mentioned. And again, even if you put like the pie charts in the first details paragraph and the bar chart in the second details paragraph, you could have just mentioned, like, just briefly said something like, and similar to music having the highest proportions of spending in both years, it also had the most participants in both years, something like that. And that there is just kind of like showing your awareness that there is a connection between these two. I would say, like, don't be careful not to make assumptions. So like, you wouldn't want to say that there were more participants because there was more money spent on it. So we don't have that information. But what you, excuse me, what you would want to do is just make some bit of a comparison between them. It would just make your essay that bit stronger. So just something to look out for in future is that if you can tie things together, if you can make comparisons, that if you can, you should. Weaknesses then. This was a surprising one. I think this is very likely the newer students who hadn't completed the course. So I think this was mostly, I'm putting this down to mostly like people who haven't finished the modules yet. Hopefully that's the case. So for anyone who's writing, like, realistically anything over 200 words, that's not realistic. So like, let's say you're just starting the course and we're telling you to take your time, figure everything out, look at your notes, spend as much time as you want to produce the best possible essay. But I mean, the best possible essay isn't over 200 words. What you want to do is produce an essay that you would produce in 20 minutes. Because there's no point in producing a big long essay that you would have no hope of ever doing in 20 minutes, because that's not you writing, like, creating an essay that you want to create. You're using your time to add extra words to an essay that you would never want to produce. So just be a little bit careful with, like, taking your time, and using that time does not mean writing longer essays. You still want to keep it between 150 to 200 words, say, in or around that kind of spectrum. So you just kind of need to figure out what are the important parts of the graph you need to include, and also like how to be concise. So not having one long sentence for each piece of data. You need to be able to group things together. This kind of brings me to the second point here, is like including every figure. We did this in a previous lesson where we talked about kind of before you start writing the essay, you can see that there is a lot of data there, and you have to use kind of like imagine what your essay is going to look like. So here we have like 8 figures here, 8 figures here, and then 2, 4, 6, 8 figures here. So you got 16 figures, and there's no way you're going to include all of that in the essay. So you have to decide how you're going to represent it. So it could be just something like you do a bit of math. So you're going to say, what's that on there, like literature. Instead of saying literature increased from 10% in 1995 to 13% in 2005, you're just going to say literature increased by 3% by 2005. So you're just going to like cut down on the number of words you're using to represent each piece of information. So that's really, really important as well. Not including the years in the overview. A lot of you did this. So it was mainly because you wanted to say that music was the highest. So you said in the bar chart, music was the highest. But that's not enough, because I don't know what year you're talking about. So if you told me music was the highest in both years, that's fine. Or music remained the highest, in 2005, then that way I know remained, so it's high in both. But if you give no indication as to which year you're talking about, then that's no use really. You haven't done what you were trying to do. So just be a bit more aware of that and be a bit more careful with that. Making no comparisons between pie charts and bar charts. So that's what I was talking about earlier on. It was just like you could have said about music being the highest in all sectors or whatever. But basically, when you're given that opportunity, you would be expected to take it. That doesn't mean that your answers didn't fulfill the task. I mean, your overviews were still accurate and appropriate, but just that extra little bit if you're going for a higher score, just to be aware of that. Right. So as usual, I've just taken a few little sentences. So these are 4 sentences from 4 different students. What I want you to do is pause the video and see if you can correct mistakes. So just pause it now, get a pen and paper, try to figure out what's wrong with these, and then I'll show you the answers and we'll just talk through them. Okay, so let's have a look. So the first one here, this basically wasn't grammar as much as it was repetition. So we had in 2 different years, and then again in 1995 and 2005. So that's unnecessary. You don't need to say the same thing twice. So you could just remove that and leave it at the graphs compare a state's expenditure on culture and education and how many individuals attended arts events in 1995 and 2005. So this will still refer back to the first part of the sentence, so you don't need to worry about repeating that. The next one. In 1995, the state spending for music was just under a half and decreased 37% by 2005. So this is by 2005. So it's over that 10-year period from 95 to 2005. So it's not really in 2005. So if you say in, what you're suggesting is that all of the decrease happened in 2005, and that, well, you're telling us nothing about the years 95 to 2004. But what you're saying is that all the decrease happened in 2005. So be careful with that by and in there. It doesn't have the exact same meaning. Although it was still the highest among all the event types. So that was just kind of cleaning up this little bit here. So highest among all the event types is more accurate. The third one then, in 1995, music had the most participants. So this year, most amount of participants we wouldn't say. So just most participants, or the highest number of participants would have been fine. With just under 12,500, and then increased to 150,000 by 2005. So this is the same thing by and in here as we had back up here in the second one. I've added commas to 12,500 and 150,000. It's not actually necessary. This is what we would always do when we're writing numbers in English. We would always put in the comma because it's just way easier for the reader to look at it and to identify the number. It's just less work for the reader. But the way it's written here, without a comma, would not affect your score whatsoever. So I've just done it for my own sake because I like it. I like it that way. And the last one then, in 2005, the government spent an almost equal proportion on theatre and music. So this again was just, you got a bit tongue-tied here, so you're trying to do too much. It's nearly an equal proportion, but it would be an almost equal proportion. So that would be a much more natural phrase there, and I guess a very useful one as well. This is something that I could see you using in a lot of essays. 35% and 37% respectively. However, visual arts and literature, so we wouldn't have they. So you would just need to know this already. There's no other way. You would have to know the word visual arts and how it's used. Visual arts and literature each only represented a small minority with 15% and 13%. So again, this is just kind of like the collocations here would be like how we do say it. So that's just a collocation thing, representing a small minority. So again, that's just a good collocation. It's something that you would be able to use again. And that is everything for today. So hopefully you've kind of taken a few bits, and when you compare my feedback with your essay, you should be able to find a few bits and pieces that you got wrong and how you can improve on it. So obviously, after you write an essay, the most important thing to do is to find the faults, because that's where you improve. So if you only look at what you've done well, you're not going to improve. You have to look at the faults. And I know sometimes it's hard to be so tough and so judgmental on yourself, but it's the only way forward. So go back, pull your essay apart, break it down into pieces, and decide what things you did well, what things you didn't do well, and how are you going to remedy this, how are you going to improve next time. So that's all very, very important. Yep, so that's it anyway. Thank you guys, take care of yourselves and have a good week.